By the way, I'm not talking conspiracy theories. I just want to lay out here at the outset that I don't believe any of the conspiracy theories. I'm not dissing those of you who do. I'm not dissing Candace Owens or anything like that. I'm going to be talking about other things tonight. And so, but I'm not even going to weigh in on any of that, right? What I will say to you is that I totally understand why people feel like the official story that Kash Patel has given us and that the government has given us, the police have given us, FBI has given us, I totally understand why a number of people doubt that, suspect it. When I read the conversation between Tyler Robinson and Lance Twiggs, I don't feel like it sounds like teenagers, or not teenagers, young people either. At the same time, we're talking about some weirdos. I don't understand almost anything about Tyler Robinson and Lance Twiggs' life and their lifestyle and what they were doing and how they were behaving. And so we're talking about some weirdos. And so I don't think that those sorts of problems in the official story are compelling enough to say, oh, it's got to be a conspiracy theory. And I've been skeptical for a long time, highly skeptical, and will continue to be, of conspiracy theories about Israel, of this nature, that Israel, that pro-Israeli actors, so to speak, or pro-Israeli agents, or some of Netanyahu's people or whatever, killed Charlie Kirk because he was going astray on the issue of Israel. I just think that that's obviously not true. And I don't think that that's even a productive road to go down. All right. But that's just me. Some of you may feel differently. But here's my point. There's actually a lot of interesting stuff to look at more deeply when it comes to Erika Kirk that has nothing to do with any kind of conspiracy theory. And so I'm going to talk about that because I feel like actually people do have a lot of feelings on this topic, this feeling that something is a bit off with Erika Kirk, but they don't want to openly say it because no one wants to be perceived, and not include me in this, no one wants to be perceived as attacking a widow. And so one of the distinctions that I've made on my social media, and I will continue to make, is that if this woman had pursued the course of a private widow, then she would be, of course, completely above critique. But from the get-go, she has jumped into, honestly, one of the most controversial and attention garnering positions and high powered positions in terms of the amount of stress, the amount of visibility, the amount of accountability of people who are constantly going to be looking at her and analyzing every word, every action. And not to mention a highly politicized job that from the outset now, being the CEO and spokeswoman of Turning Point, as Erika is going to be, Charlie's replacement, the amount of highly charged political attention and scrutiny that she's going to be receiving. So my point to everyone is this. She did not choose to be a widow. I do not believe that, no. And I take her love and her story about her and Charlie and their relationship, I take that at face value. And I do believe that she loved him, and I do believe that she is grieving and hurting. Here's the thing, though. And this, I think, is what's throwing a number of people, or giving people a sense that there's a kind of a duality or a duplicity going on in her part. This is also a highly ambitious career woman that we're talking about. And I say that with no judgment or negativity on that point, because those of you who know my bio, and maybe not everyone does who's coming to this video, but those of you who know my bio know that in a lot of ways, I have a number of classically feminist, or even 1960s feminist beliefs. And I grew up in a very traditional home, stay-at-home mother for the most part. So that's a whole story I don't want to get into, but wonderful mother, saintly mother, but stay-at-home mother, traditional, didn't even have sex till she was married. I'm serious. That's not some lie that she's told me or whatever, but no, it's true. Didn't have sex till she was married. She wanted to be a submissive housewife, just wanted to have kids, wanted to support her husband, et cetera, et cetera. I grew up in East Texas Southern Baptist Church. I went to church on average 3 times a week, went on mission trips, was born again, all of that. I say that because I think that I have some understanding of where people with the perspective, the traditional perspective, the trad perspective, are coming from. And I just have to tell you that when I look at Erika Kirk and I look at her bio, this is not the traditional helpmeet, domesticity-centered biography here. This is very much a career woman in the vein of what the classical and 1960s feminists were advocating, which is, if we look at Erika's bio, and I'll talk about this more as we get into it, which is late marriage, right? Didn't marry Charlie until her early 30s. She was, yes, 5 years older than him. Late motherhood and a relentless focus on career advancement and of achievement that is actually, I would say, for on the extreme end for most women. And again, I'm not knocking it. I look at her bio and I see this is a woman who from from teenage years has been on fire to make a name for herself in the professional world in some way. Education also, there's been so much criticism on the right, and I have shared in that as a former professor. For those who don't know my bio, former full-time English lecturer at a big university. I and others, particularly on the right, have been critiquing academia now for years for a number of things. You can look at my playlist, my academia playlist, and see what my critiques are. But you look at the biography of Erika Kirk, and this is someone who seems to highly value academic achievement because she has not only a double major, double degree in, I think, political science, something else. She has a master's or the equivalent of a master's in law. It's like a Juris Master's. She has completed a doctorate in Christian administration, I believe. And then now she's working on, or Christian service, I can't remember what exactly it was, the ministry. And now she's working on her doctorate in biblical studies. Now, I had a laugh on Ethan Ralph's show earlier today because we were talking about how both of her doctorates will have been from Liberty University, which is the school that Jerry Falwell founded. And I know that does get a laugh, right? And I laugh at it too. But I know people who've gone to that school, and the school has standards that are not any less rigorous than your average, college down the road. So even though, yes, very right-wing shift and Christian shift, but this point that I'm trying to make here is that this is a woman who has you really couldn't have a more educated biography. Actually, you couldn't. And then you look, she started in her, as soon as she was out of the house, so to speak, at age 18 or whatever, starting a nonprofit organization. She started like several nonprofits. She pursued for a while a career in Hollywood, the entertainment industry. She says that she walked away from it. Who knows what the truth is on that and those kinds of situations. But she was like featured on a Bravo reality show, for example, called Summer House. And she was Miss Arizona 2012. People can, again, shrug off or laugh at pageants, but you don't get to that position. You don't become Miss Arizona without a hell of a lot of hard work. You have to work really hard to get to that. And then she's done a bunch of other things. If you look at her page, and by the way, I'm going somewhere with this, and it's not to trash her for having ambition, by the way, and I want to talk about that in a minute. But this is my, by the way, thank you and hello to my mods. I saw you there, Laura B. Sorry, I saw you there, Laura B. Sorry if my sound has been off a little bit. Anyway, Laura B, shout out to you. And as always, to Vanessa and AJ and Rebel Bird. So anyway, this is earlier. I went on Ethan Ralph's show. Always interesting. Never had an issue with him. But let me show you what we talked about. One of the things that we talked about. So this is Erika Kirk's bio, and this is on her website. She has a website. And this is her bio, and this was the bio that she had prior to Charlie Kirk's death as well. So hasn't been changed yet or anything. She calls herself a multidimensional philanthropist, a social entrepreneur. By the way, I'm just going to say it since we're getting real here. To me, these are kind of borderline red flags here. Just almost kind of a little tiny red flag here, because it reminds me of just kind of the the word salad and the bloated, excessive phraseology that people use when they want to make themselves sound as impressive as possible. But then again, it's her website. She's promoting herself. So whatever, okay? But what I'm trying to get across to you here is this is not traditional help meet, traditional domestic centered female role here that we're seeing, okay? So multidimensional philanthropist and social entrepreneur, Erika's fearless spirit mixed in with her bold and steadfast faith sustains her borderless heart. Aside from her career in the entertainment industry, Erika's most passionate about her ministry, Bible in 365. So Bible in 365 is an app that she developed. It's like every day it's a different Bible study prompt, okay? And I believe that's, she probably might do other things with that company as well, but that's the main thing. And purpose-driven clothing line. Yes, she has a purpose-driven clothing line. I'm really trying to talk about this without being condescending. So if you detect it in my voice, it's not there. If someone has strong Christian beliefs and they also want to combine that with an interest in fashion, I don't have a problem with that, okay? But again, I'm trying to tell you, this is not a traditional woman. This is a hyper career woman here, a hyper ambitious woman. And purpose-driven clothing line proclaim. Currently, she is pursuing a doctorate in biblical studies. And then also it says Ease Brands. So she has like clothing brands and I guess other brands. Okay, it's a screenshot, so I can't click on it. So this is my point, and I'm going to move on to other points, but this is my point, is A, she and Turning Point should have anticipated that there would be a bit of a culture clash, putting a woman with her ambition and her obvious performative talent and aptitude in this role immediately after Charlie's death with no sort of mourning period designated for her where she could just kind of go away and sort of be quiet for a bit. And at least the perception would be that she was focusing on family. Just to put this woman in here, most people did not know her. I understand, like, if you were a big fan of Charlie Kirk, then you knew her and they would do podcasts and things together and what have you. But I'm just saying for most people, it was a little bit weird. And I'm just saying that I think that some of what her critics are picking up on and I'm seeing a lot of right-wing distaste for her too. The left-wing stuff was expected, and I figured that there would be other people like me who would pick up on the at least perceived hypocrisy of a woman who seems to have promoted for years, and also with her husband, the idea of a traditional role. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. A woman like that then taking on this high-powered, very visible CEO role. I mean, she overnight became one of the most powerful people, I think, in the conservative movement, right? I think there should have been some anticipation that that might rub some people the wrong way, even on the right. And I'm seeing more and more people, and I know it's a lot of keyboard warriors, who cares? You know, a lot of what we're talking about on Twitter is not mainstream. But I do see people on the right commenting on the fact that, like, hey, you know, shouldn't you be focusing on your children or get back in the home or whatever? And I'm not saying this is representative, again, of like most Republicans or conservatives, but they should have anticipated that there would be an optics problem. Now, that's one thing. The other thing I want to point out is that this is going to be a problem if in the future she's going to continue now as the spokesperson for Turning Point. Presumably, I guess she'll be going out and doing events like Charlie was doing. And I've seen people on the right even saying that what's exciting about Erika Kirk as leader of Turning Point is that she's going to be able to do all this outreach to girls, and she's going to be able to show girls that what they've been told by society about needing a career and not focusing on the home and is wrong, and they need to go back to basics and be submissive and don't bother getting a college education and pop out as many kids as you can as early as you can. There's going to be a problem here with her being, if she's going to continue to be the messenger and the promoter of that idea. It's just too incongruous with her lifestyle, who she had and who she is, who she has been and who she will continue to be. And a friend of mine, I haven't had time to get back to him, but he messaged me, who he used to be in the ministry, and I don't know, is on the right or has a number of friends on the right. And he was saying basically, like, I think you're kind of misunderstanding this and sort of misreading Erika Kirk and also the and also conservatives. He said, I don't really know any conservative men personally who mind their wives working. This is not like this idea, this traditionalism that women shouldn't work is not something that is common in just, your church down the street or whatever. And then he also said to me basically something to the effect of, it doesn't make someone a hypocrite that they don't always live up to their ideals. In other words, it's not necessarily hypocritical for Erika Kirk to have been living her life this way and at the same time telling women that it's probably better if you don't wait till your 30s to get married and have kids. It's probably better if you focus on your kids and don't focus on work and a professional life. I get it. Everybody falls short of their ideology, but we're not talking about falling short of your ideals here. We're talking about someone who, with Erika Kirk, whose life seems to be completely counter to what she's promoting, and I assume will be promoting for other women. And so I'm not going to keep beating the dead horse with this, so to speak. No, sorry, a bad pun there or whatever. But I'm not going to keep this up because I think everybody gets it. I want to move on to some other things. I want to talk about this question of, does she seem like she really has been grieving? Has her behavior been weird the last week or two, the last couple of weeks? Is there something wrong and unseemly in that? Or are we being totally unfair here and even misogynist to be critiquing how a widow is behaving? And so I want to address that. I want to talk about that. I wanted to look at a bit of the memorial. I wanted to also get into a larger discussion of like what I thought about that memorial and stuff. So I will do all of that in a minute. But I do think that this kind of hypocrisy matters. And it's just too much, y'all. It's too much to take to look on Twitter X, a week or so ago, and to see that some guy had posted something saying, this is the death of feminism. Erika Kirk is the death of feminism. And you have a picture of her there at the podium at the memorial. And, this post had gotten like 10 million views or something. And I'm thinking, look, I'm the last person these days, or one of the last, to be defending modern feminism because I hate what feminism has become. I hate the Me Too stuff. I hate how whiny it is, how victim oriented it is. I don't like all of that. But there are things about the older feminism, not everything, maybe not even most of it, I don't know. But there were aspects of the older feminism that I continue to find compelling. The understanding that women do have ambitions and aptitudes and feelings that are not solely met by a domestic environment. Maybe not all women or whatever, but a lot of women. And so when I look at someone then like Erika Kirk, who seems to be honestly the epitome of that, I mean, her life demonstrates she is an object lesson in what a classically feminist woman looks like. I mean, seriously. And so this is something that I have been pushing back on and will continue to push back on it. And I'm not trying to hide the fact. Oh, I wanted to talk about this. Hold on a second. In a minute. I'm not, y'all, trying to hide the fact either that I don't have personal feelings that come into this. I've gotten some critiques on Twitter where people will say things to me like, what's wrong with you? Why do you care? Why won't you just leave this woman alone? Why are you talking about her so much or whatever? Well, we all have interest in different things for different reasons, but I've always been very above board about the fact that I did not like the model that I got growing up, the model of womanhood that I saw. It was very traditional, and my mom suffered greatly in her marriage and in her life because she was trying to live up to a traditional ideal that was encouraged by her church and by the traditional society that she was in. And I saw the negative side of that. I saw it in my grandmother's life. And I am extremely centered and I think open about the fact that, yes, I understand that it's not optimal for kids to be in daycare when their mothers could be at home with them, that it's probably the best to have a caretaker with the child at home for the first formative years. Like, these are things I understand. And I also understand that there are a lot of women who want to stay home, who don't want a high-powered career or don't want some kind of achievement or expression outside the home. So yes, there are a lot of women with a lot of different thoughts and feelings and needs. But I know from personal experience that a lot of women do have aptitudes and desires that go outside the domestic sphere. And I don't think that that is unseemly or inappropriate or anything in any way, just like it isn't for men. And you can go back to the novel Jane Eyre, if you want to, by Charlotte Bronte. And they were talking 19th century novel, uber popular novel. And you can look at her monologue when her character Jane is standing on the balcony one night, and she's looking at the forest, stretching into oblivion at this place where she's a governess and she can't ever leave. She's kind of trapped in this domestic sphere. And she says, why do men not understand that we women, we're not so different from them? We have a desire for freedom. We have a desire to taste experience. We have a desire even, yes, for danger sometimes. And I know a lot of men know that, right? That's the other thing that I want to say too, before we look at more at Erika Kirk, is that I actually don't think that this kind of quote unquote propaganda does reflect reality. It's just like my friend saying, well, most conservative men that I know, they don't mind their women working. That's the other thing that's so fascinating here, y'all. I posted this on Twitter the other day. I said, take a lesson also from Charlie Kirk's attraction and love for his wife. Because here's the deal, y'all. Charlie Kirk met Erika when he was in his late 20s. She was 5 years older than him. But he met her when he was in his late 20s. He had already well formed his political ideas, and a lot of the, I think, opinions that he has that he delivered in a gentle way usually, but opinions about that Erika shared about women's role in the world and ideal focus on domesticity, et cetera, right? But who was it that he ended up pursuing? Who was it that he fell for? Who was it that he chose not only to build a life with, but as it turns out, a professional partnership with? It wasn't the young 18, 19, 20 something, I don't know anything girl. It wasn't the uneducated girl. And by the way, I'm not throwing any shade at anyone. By the way, let me fix my hair. Speaking of priorities. I'm not throwing any shade at anyone who didn't go to college or finish high school or anything like that, right? I absolutely think that you can be a brilliant person and self-educate. But I'm saying he didn't go for the uneducated, young, I don't know anything girl. He didn't go for the unaccomplished, I'm just really want to, build a great home for my husband and bake bread and this and that. He didn't go for that. He went for the most ambitious, career-oriented woman that probably, you could come up with, honestly. Now, yes, she had traditional beliefs, and I'm not saying that she didn't. And they had, I'm sure, quite a foundation in many other ways. But I'm just trying to say that I think these days in the modern world, when it comes down to it, even the men who promote traditional propaganda, when it comes down to it, they want someone accomplished. They want often a kind of a prize, and they want, let's get down to it, they want, what is it? A soulmate, someone that's on their wavelength that they can talk to, who can really share in their life's work. And that is really the beautiful love story of Charlie Kirk and Erika Kirk, is that he seems to have taken her on board fully as a partner, despite the the current mood of many on the right, particularly online, when it comes to women's roles. So anyway, those are my thoughts about that, and about this idea of hypocrisy and Erika Kirk's role and all that. I will say one more thing here, and yeah, this is gonna make some people mad, but she has 2 young children. One of them's 1, one of them's 3. She's going to be CEO and spokeswoman for the most, I don't want to say notorious because that sounds bad, but one of the most famous political organizations. And it's one of the most famous now because Turning Point it was Charlie Kirk's. So the point I'm trying to make is she's about to take on, like I said, basically one of the most high-powered, high-stress, high-caliber, high-stakes, masculinized, if you want to use that term, masculinized positions that she could take on. Help me if I'm wrong here. I don't see any way in hell that you can do that and devote a significant amount of attention to mothering. I just don't. I know, y'all, I know just the little bit of shit that I have to do to keep my measly little, broken down YouTube car going, to keep the Colonel Kurtz to keep the Colonel Kurtz empire going. I know just how much that takes. And it ain't nothing. It's like 1/500th of what this woman has taken on, or more of what this woman has taken on. And you think about all the traveling she's going to have to do, all of the, even if she doesn't do everything exactly like Charlie did or whatever, or is not helming the show, the podcast every day, just the amount of travel she's going to have to do, the amount of meetings, the amount of just work, writing. I mean, just it is just unbelievable to me that she will be able to do that and will be able to devote a significant amount of attention to her children. I anticipate that she will have 1, 2, 3 nannies, however many I guess it takes. I don't even know because I don't have kids or whatever, right? But she'll have some nannies, and she will, I'm sure, have situations where it'll be like, okay, I'm writing this speech, so bring Sarah or whatever their names are. I'm not trying to be flippant, but bring my kid over here and I'll sit with her and kind of hold her for a bit, and whatever. Like I understand there will be attempts made at integration, and this is what a lot of high power people do. But I'm just saying this sure does not gel. It sure doesn't gel in any way with the idea of someone whose focus is going to be children centered or domesticity centered. And again, people can say, well, leave her alone. It's none of your business. Well, but it becomes our business when this person puts herself forward, about as far forward as you can, in not only a public role, but yes, a propagandistic role. It might be propaganda that you like, or propaganda that's largely good or net gain or whatever, but it's a highly charged propagandistic role. You can't do that and then say, oh, but don't talk about my hypocrisies, or don't talk about the fact that the life that I'm living seems to be like the complete opposite of these ideals that we're promoting. It just doesn't make sense. I'm going to take a 5-minute break, and then I'm coming back. I do take breaks. I don't know how long we're going to go. There's a number of things I want to talk about, so it's probably going to be, another 45 minutes or so. When we come back, I want to look at this clip that's making some people feel so icky. I want to talk about this question of, is it okay to critique how she's behaving? How is she behaving in terms of grief? I want to look at this and talk about it, and we'll get into it. Okay, so 5 minutes. I will be back. Hang around, and yeah, see you. All right. Yeah. So Turning Point should have given her, someone over there should have said to her, look, okay, you're going to take this role over. It's what Charlie wanted. Okay, we understand, but you're going to have to kind of lay low for a month or two so that you will be perceived at least as grieving appropriately. And look, I understand that people say that this is not fair, that we shouldn't be holding her to this standard and scrutinizing her behavior. But again, I'm just saying that she and everybody around her, they got to put their big boy pants on, so to speak, and suit up, because she's not taking on just some, this is not like when the president of a little, company down the street, or the grocery store, your local grocery store, in the old days, the owner dies and then his widow runs it, while she's getting over her grief, because she has to keep bringing in money. I mean, this was a woman who received pledges of support, of financial support, for as long as her children were children and beyond, actually, right? They offered to pay for their schooling as well. She received absolute pledges of total financial support from Elon Musk, from James Hetfield of Metallica. I mean, good for him. It seemed kind of random to me, but good for him, or whatever. Like, I'm sure they already had a lot of money. I mean, Charlie Kirk was making $500,000 every year with Turning Point, which, again, don't begrudge him at all. He was very talented at what he did, and was obviously, the people investing that money in him felt like he was earning it and was worth it. But, and she could put up a GoFundMe. I don't think she's done that, but she could do a GoFundMe and get tons of money. I mean, my point is just to say that there were ways that this woman could have not only adequately but comfortably sustained herself and her family without taking on the most highly politicized, attention charged role that she has now. So I'm just not going to buy that argument that this was just something that she had to do, and she's just fallen into this, whatever, and now we just can't criticize her. That's BS. But they should have given her a mourning period and not had her out doing stuff like this. And the problem with this, I'm going to show this clip here. Well, let's just watch it. Okay, so this is a clip that you've seen it probably. It's been sent around basically everywhere now, with people arguing over it. First of all, arguing, does she show the appropriate amount of grief here? Is there something wrong here? Do we even have the right to be analyzing this? So we're going to watch this. I think it's like a minute, and then I'm going to give you my impressions. And yeah, you're not going to like some of them, I bet.
Charlie's show became the North Star for freedom of speech, but in a way where when he spoke, and whatever came across his desk or whatever he put on the air was right.
Yes.
It wasn't inflated. It wasn't awkwardly optimistic that had no leverage behind it. It was the gold standard.
It was grounded in the
extremely grounded
wisdom of the audience.
But not only that, he had a team, still does, all of you, that was the sounding board of that. And collectively, each one of you are a piece of his brain. And so what I'm getting at here is the Charlie Kirk show is not going anywhere. My husband's voice will live on. The show will go on. The team is keeping this alive because we have Charlie in each and every one of us. Yes. And it is going to be continually the North Star of the conservative movement, of the voice of the youth, of the voice of the base, and that will not end. This is not going anywhere. It's just not.
All right. So a lot of it, I said this on Twitter, a lot of this sounded like word salad to me, and it reminded me of a lot of the way that people express themselves who are trying to come off as eloquent, but there's not really a lot of substance behind it. I don't know. It was just a weird kind of phrasing there from her. But again, there's nothing malevolent in that. I can look at that and I can say, it sounds like a lot of like pretentious nothing, word salad. And yeah, it kind of reminds me in a way of the way that a couple of other blondes, that notorious blondes that we have talked about over the years, express themselves. But no, I'm not trying to suggest that this woman is like them. Here's about as far, y'all want to hear me push my opinion of Erika Kirk about as far as I feel comfortable pushing it into what I think might be her negative intentions. I do think that she loved Charlie. I don't think that she had anything at all to do with what happened to him. I do think that when you look at the way that she comports herself in podcasts or on stage, or when you look at her bio, I see one of two things. I see either that this is someone who is just extremely ambitious and who is extremely focused on her image and the image that she puts out, and a kind of performativity that she thinks works for her, that no doubt her time in beauty pageants, pursuing that dream for years, probably instilled. Either that, or if we want to go a shade darker and get into something that would be a little more worrying, either that or we've got some narcissism going on. And I'm not talking about a malevolent character like Amber Heard or Blake Lively. But I'm talking, what I'm trying to get at here is this. I think one thing that's also rubbing people the wrong way, and I've seen people flat out say it online, is the feeling that she may, yes, be upset or even very upset about her husband's murder, but she also appears to be really enjoying her time in the spotlight. And she seems to be really elated with and pleased about her new role. And that seems, I think that that's something that a number of people are sensing, and they feel like they can't come out and say it. You know, if you go on the Reddit boards, which I know Reddit generally leans more to the left, and you can't, it's not a scientific survey. It's just people get online and mouth off, right? But there's a post on the Reddit boards, and it was something that someone posted right after the memorial service. And basically the gist of it was, I feel bad for feeling this way, but something about Erika Kirk feels off or feels weird. And if you look at that, the post actually blew up, and it's gotten, I think by now, it's probably gotten close to 1,000 comments. And basically it's people from both sides of the political aisle. Yes, some liberals, but actually I noticed a lot of conservatives or people on the right as well, and everything in between, of people saying, wow, I'm glad that I'm not the only one. I was feeling like there was something wrong with me, or that I was a bad person. When I saw that memorial service, it seemed off to me too. And I think what people are saying here, I'm going to put something up here, get a better picture here. I think that I think what people are really saying here is that something seems overly performative about her. And some people are just not good at coming off naturally. And it could be that all of that time that Erika Kirk spent in those beauty pageants, it gave her a lot of poise and a lot of confidence, but it also, those things really, I mean, just watch a beauty pageant. There's nothing genuine about the way that those women communicate or behave or come across. I mean, most of the time, I think that our familiarity with beauty pageants comes from those ridiculous blooper reels of women saying ridiculous things. Like, what was the most famous one? It was South Carolina, right? Do you remember years and years ago, Miss South Carolina, and it was Mario Lopez was the MC. And so it was the interview portion, and they were down to 12 finalists, and it was the interview portion, and she was asked, I wish we should just take the excuse to watch it. I mean, what the hell, it's short. I know y'all have all seen it. But I've always felt that beauty pageants really, in a way, did a disservice to their contestants, because the kind of communication that they learn in those things, that those women learn, it's South Carolina, Iraq. Here we go. The kind of communication that they learn in these pageants that they think is effective for them, or they're told is effective for them, it's often really like empty. It's a lot of like platitudes. It comes across as overly performative, not genuine. And so anyway, but let's look at this real quick, and then we'll get back to Erika.
Okay. Recent polls have shown a fifth of Americans can't locate the U.S. on a world map. Why do you think this is?
I personally believe that U.S. Americans are unable to do so because some people out there in our nation don't have maps, and I believe that our education, like such as in South Africa and the Iraq, everywhere like such as, and I believe that they should, our education over here in the U.S. should help the U.S. or should help South Africa and should help the Iraq and the Asian countries, so we will be able to build up our future for our.
Thank you very much, South Carolina.
Look, I'm not even going to try to say that Charlie Kirk's wife's anything like that. In fact, this makes her look good and just shows you like how actually polished and eloquent Charlie Kirk's wife, Erika Kirk, is. But what I will say, if I'm going to try to find a clip where I'm going to find, okay, so let's look at the clip where she forgives Tyler Robinson. And by the way, I had no issue with the forgiving, like some right-wing commentators did. I know like Matt Walsh, for instance, and some others were saying, oh, this is feminizing Christianity, or basically the equivalent of that. And I think that's BS. But I want to look at this segment because basically I think it sort of encompasses like the good and the bad of her performative style. And I think it shows you actually why some people are a little like, I don't know.
My husband, Charlie, he wanted to save young men, just like the one who took his life. That young man on the cross, our Savior said, Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do. That young man, I forgive him.
So look, this is like a Rorschach test for so much. It is such a Rorschach. And this is what I mean by this. How you view what she's doing here, it's such a matter of personal taste and personal opinion, because some people see this and they see, I'm sure a lot of people, and they see nothing but a genuine, riveting, emotional, spiritual act here. And I don't mean act in a negative, duplicitous sense, like an act of forgiveness, right? This action that she's taking. And they also will say, look at how well she is upholding her husband's legacy, that she's able to put her emotions aside and she's able to speak this eloquently, and she's able to be this confident and this polished. She is in every way fulfilling the wishes that Charlie Kirk would have had for how she would comport herself after his death. That's one perspective. The other perspective is, and this is where I think a lot of people are kind of like whispering, like, I don't know, is that it seems highly, highly scripted and choreographed down to, and performative down to the timed, looks up, down, and all of that. And there is just no way to avoid the fact that that's going to rub a lot of people the wrong way at a memorial service, particularly if people also have the feeling of like, who is this woman that's suddenly the new CEO? When they introduced her at the memorial, that was how they introduced her up in the big Jumbotron, is as the CEO of Turning Point. And it's like, I guess what I'm trying to say to you is this. I think there's a real discordance with that memorial, in that they were trying to accomplish two different things. And I'm not sure that the two things can be totally like integrated together smoothly. One, they were trying to memorialize Charlie Kirk. And so this was supposed to be first and foremost in memory of him and celebration of him and all of that. On the other hand, they were also trying to promote Turning Point. They were trying to recruit, use this opportunity where all this attention is on them, and now they get all this sympathy and everything. Okay, we're going to take advantage of that. We're going to really make a show of this, and we're going to use this as a recruitment staging event. And not only that, but as a way to roll out our new CEO and spokesperson. We're going to not only introduce people to Charlie's replacement, but we're going to like make a big show of introducing her, right? Just even down to like the pyrotechnics, right? And so I think the problem, and I think you can see even in the way that Erika Kirk handled the memorial, you can see those two goals. That on the one hand, it's trying to show genuine emotion about Charlie. On the other hand, she's wanting to do that beauty pageant thing, and she's wanting to put on a good show. And again, I'm not even saying that that is something that should be criticized. You know, people say, well, Charlie would have wanted that. And this was his organization. It was what he built. He would want us to be recruiting. He would want people to see his beautiful, eloquent wife out there and everything. But what I am saying is they should have been aware that this discordance was going to be a kind of a problem, because it does rub a lot of people the wrong way. People just don't like to feel that that when someone dies, people are milking it, or they're cashing in on it, or they don't want to feel like a widow might be getting some kind of enjoyment out of her new role or this performance, right? And so we can't know without getting inside her head what exactly Erika Kirk is thinking and feeling. And I also, having lost people dear to me in my life, I also know that your emotions can be all over the map, and that you can also be numb, and that also you can feel good things. It makes total sense if Erika Kirk, on the one hand, is devastated about losing her husband and the father of her children, and on the other hand, is excited and energized about all of this stuff that she's been working her whole life really in a way to achieve, that now she has it and more, right? I mean, she has so much power now in a way that I'm seeing people on the right credibly touting her as the next vice president, that J.D. Vance, when he runs for president, that this would be the ideal pick for him, is Erika Kirk as his VP. And so when you get into that zone, and you get into that zone overnight, you go from what she was to what she is now, it's just going to be rocky, and it's going to create a lot of controversy and a lot of criticism. And again, that's one of the reasons why I think after the memorial, at least, they should have said, okay, have a mourning period and let's chill out. And maybe that's what she's going to do. I mean, I haven't seen her out there really since that podcast that she filmed, a few days ago. But so now the funeral, the memorial, I was just talking to Ethan Ralph about this. Can we all say that maybe the pyrotechnics were a bridge too far? Can we at least agree on that? Or is it verboten? Is it wrong to even criticize the fireworks? It's not like I think it's wrong, or other people think that it's immoral in some way to have the fireworks. But I think that people are really sensitive to the feeling that they are being politically propagandized. And this may have been something that the base really loved, and that Trump voters really loved, and that people on the right really loved, and Charlie fans really loved. And so maybe that's all that matters. I don't know. But it's the pyrotechnics, they are such low-hanging fruit, y'all, such low-hanging fruit for critics. And I think that because they were already with this event, they were already running the risk of alienating people with how showy it was. And like I said, the performativity of it, and Erika Kirk and everything, I think this would have just been a real obvious way to tone it down without causing big problems. It's okay, maybe we don't need the pyrotechnics. All right, I got a super chat. Dan Campbell says, our late spouses would want us to enjoy ourselves, to grieve, but also to move on, to praise them for their foibles, and for family to enjoy joking about their shortcomings. Yes, I don't disagree with that. I do not disagree with that at all. And again, maybe that's all that mattered, is what Erika and the people closest to Charlie and their fans were getting out of it. So, but again, I'm just speaking just in terms of trying to explain, I think, why people have certain feelings about this. And I think too that it's going to be, how do I want to put this? I think it's also going to be, it's just going to really ramp up a lot of pressure on Erika going forward, this role. I just hope that psychologically, honestly, I'm being totally serious here with sympathy for her. I just hope that she is prepared for it, because it's one thing, I'll say this, it's one thing to look at what Charlie Kirk was doing from the sidelines, even when you're married to that person and you share life with them, and frustrations and fears and everything. It's one thing to look at it from the sidelines, but it's another thing to actually do that. And he had an incredibly stressful controversial job, and he handled it very well. And there were so many opportunities for him to get tripped up along the way. And to his credit, he didn't. I know that he wasn't everyone's taste, and he said things that offended people. At times he said things that offended me, but from what I've seen of him, he generally handled himself and these events very, very well. And apparently was put years and years of hard fucking work into it. Charlie Kirk did. Now, I want to say something about Trump. Okay, I mentioned this the other day, but I didn't make a big deal out of it. But I thought this was interesting, and I've had it confirmed to me. Apparently, when Trump got up, and those of you who have watched my stuff, you know that I am not a Trump hater. I really I am a big fan of a lot that he's done, critic of other stuff he's done or whatever, but I've never seen him as like some kind of horrible guy or existential threat to the US or anything like that, right? I think it's interesting. This was reported on by Newsmax on the Bill O'Reilly show, and it did not get, y'all, it did not get much press coverage at all. I guess people just didn't think it was interesting or want to talk about it. But on the O'Reilly show, my significant other was watching this the other night, the O'Reilly online show. This guy from Newsmax, this reporter from Newsmax said that when Trump took the stage at the memorial, that half the stadium basically cleared out. He said that people, for whatever reason, did not want to hear what Trump was saying, or were not receptive to it, or maybe they were turned off or annoyed by the comments that he made about forgiveness, or rather that he would not forgive. But apparently, a lot of the people came to memorialize Charlie Kirk and to hear his widow, and not to hear from Donald Trump, or they were turned off by what Trump started saying, because this Newsmax guy said this, and a friend of mine confirmed it, that like half the stadium cleared out. A lot of people, he said anywhere from like a third to a half. And that's what my friend said as well. And so I thought that was interesting. And again, this just goes to show you sort of there's a lot of complicated stuff sort of at work in this memorial. It wasn't just a memorial, I guess is what I'm saying. And so there were people, I think, who were there to see the memorial part, not to see the political part. And so when Trump got up and started talking, then a lot of those people cleared out. The only thing that I would add, I guess, Dan Campbell, to this conversation that we're having basically about the nature of this memorial, is that I don't think that people can claim that this was just intended to be a memorial. In other words, if it were just a memorial, then I feel like criticism would be more off the table. It's like, come on, y'all, it's just a memorial. You know, let's lay off. But it was just so obviously not intended to just be a memorial. And I guess what annoys me, again, more than most things, is if I detect some hypocrisy. And so I do think, not with you, but I do think that there is something hypocritical about people who will put together such a big show that's obviously, at least in part, meant to be propagandistic, or meant to recruit people, or meant to promote Turning Point, and meant to promote a particular ideology or what have you. People develop this, promote this, and then when they get any criticism of that ideology that's being promoted, or of that aspect of the memorial, then it's like, no, it's just a memorial. It's just a memorial. What's wrong with you? Do you go to your friends' funerals and criticize how they put their funerals together? You know, so I just don't like this sort of wink, wink, we know what we're doing, but we're going to act like we don't know what we're doing thing. And that's the other thing that I think rubs a lot of people wrong about Erika Kirk, is that she's so obviously ambitious. She's so obviously a career woman. This so obviously her becoming CEO of Turning Point and replacing Charlie. This is so obviously about more than just being the dutiful, reluctant, widow. And I just get annoyed when people kind of try to hide behind that. It's like, here she is, CEO, spokesperson, political activist. She's even more conservative than Charlie, apparently. Love her. And she's going to give this big speech, and we're going to tout her as the CEO. But then don't you criticize this widow. How dare you criticize the widow? It just doesn't work. So you got to kind of, take the good, not you personally, but people got to take the criticism with the rest of it, I do think. Right. It's complicated. Look, it's complicated, this whole question of women's place in the home, particularly as mothers, because I think that most of us realize that if the choice is a kid going to daycare or being with someone other than mom and dad, that unless mom and dad suck, the kid's going to want mom and dad. The kid would choose to be with mom and dad. I mean, I remember I didn't go to daycare, but I didn't even like going to preschool or kindergarten. You really don't even like going to school and getting away from home until you're a bit older, right? In your teenage years or whatever. And I know that there's research out there that shows that kids can be damaged by negative or problematic daycare environments and problematic caregivers and all of that. Like, I know that. And so, and I also know that there are a lot of women who are working, a lot of mothers who are working, who want to be stay-at-home moms, who wish that they had the economic freedom to say, to hell with this job. I'm going to go home and be with my family. And that's what's meaningful to me. Like, I know all of these things. And today when I was on Ethan Ralph's show, someone pointed out that, this talk of career and ambition and professional fulfillment for a number of women who are working class women, the idea of going to McDonald's is not some kind of great fulfilling career experience for them. And that there's something really almost kind of classist about talking about women and their role and not acknowledging that a lot of women in jobs don't want to be in those jobs. They're not pursuing some kind of deeper fulfillment emotionally or whatever, right? So it's thorny. I recognize all these things. And if I had a child, I think that I would want to spend, during their formative years, would want to spend a lot of time at home. I feel like that would be the right thing. On the other hand, I also know, and this goes, you can go back to the 1960s classic, The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan. Or go to the Reddit boards for mommies. I also know that there are a hell of a lot of women who, as much as they love their children and value motherhood, they do feel like they're, in a lot of ways, they are really shut down and sort of withering away, being in just a domestic environment or just having domestic pursuits and nothing outside of that. And I know that women have a great need for all kinds of experiences and for fulfillment in various ways, right? So just like Erika Kirk evidently did, she married Charlie Kirk and she had kids, and she did not put away the clothing line. She didn't put away Bible 365 or whatever. She didn't shut down her website. She was still out there, by all appearances, doing a lot of professional work. And so I just feel like the best way to face these things is to be honest about them and not to be hypocritical. But I'll tell y'all, I used to teach a gender and culture course when I was a college professor, college English lecturer. And because my boss knew that I had read pretty extensively in gender theory stuff from lots of different perspectives, but that I had read a lot in that and even written some stuff about it, academic stuff about it, they let me teach a course, an upper level gender and culture course. And I actually ended up teaching it at this college for a few years. And my goal with a course like this was to eschew the normal sort of leftist indoctrination for actually giving these, and they were mostly women, giving these women actually a chance to really think about what they wanted their lives to be going forward. And so we read text about all kinds of things, from the struggles, that women may face in climbing the career ladder to motherhood, et cetera. But one of the main things that I communicated to them, that I tried to communicate to them, was you cannot have it all the time in life. And that one of the sad lessons of adulthood is that any time that you devote to one thing, it's like pulling a thread out of a sweater. Anytime that you devote to one thing necessarily means that something else in your life in some way is going to have less of you. And that for the choices that you make, time-wise, the way you allocate your time, that they do have consequences. And I do think that feminism has been guilty of relentlessly promoting this idea of the professional career woman without doing a better job of acknowledging that modern society often makes these two things, career and motherhood, really, really difficult or impossible to balance. And that to a degree, one does have to make some choices. And so I've seen friends of mine who have negotiated that in various ways. And for a number of them, it meant that when they had their children, they either quit their jobs or they made a conscious decision to channel their ingenuity and creativity and professionalism into something that they could do at home, because thankfully with modern technology and the digital culture, like I am right now, we can do a hell of a lot of stuff from home. And so if I did have a kid, that's one of those things where if I were able to quit the full-time job and my man was supporting me, as would be the case, then I could still do this YouTube and the social media stuff, right? Like, so there are things that you can do, but you do have to be honest about the trade-offs. And I think feminism has been too blasé about that and too dismissive in a lot of ways of the very real demands of motherhood, and then vice versa the other way. I do think that the trad propaganda that's so popular online, at least, I don't know. Again, my friend was saying, well, my conservative guy friends, they don't buy a lot of this, right? So it depends, I know. But I do think that the trad propaganda is not honest about the fact that there are a lot of women with a lot of aptitudes and desires that do extend beyond the home. And then in that way, women and men, they really aren't necessarily that different. Instead of this sort of dismissive thing of like, ladies, why would you want to be stuck in some office typing away on a keyboard when you could be home all the time with your precious babies? Well, gee, I don't know. Maybe because women need some stimulation outside the home and some adult conversation that's not just toddler babblings. And, it's men. It's not too hard to use your imagination. Just imagine that you were at home all day, every day, with kids and domesticity. You may think that it would be paradise not having to go to that corporate job and put on the suit and tie, but I think what you'd find very quickly is that it's full of that lifestyle is full of tremendous frustrations and difficulties as well, right? So I just think that the trad propaganda needs to get a little bit more real about that. I told this story the other night about my grandma, who was about as trad as you can get, old school trad, farmer's wife or whatever. But and she quit her education. She quit college to fully support my grandfather. But at a certain point, when her kids were older, she asked if she could go back to school because she wanted to pursue some kind of professional work or get a real estate license. And he told her no. He said, I want my wife focused on me and the home as is proper. And he wasn't a bad man or anything. He was a good guy, my grandfather. And so she said, okay. And she gave it up. And at the end of his life, he bitterly, bitterly regretted that. It was one of his big regrets because he could look back and see that he had stunted her development and that she, in some ways, was a less fully developed and less fulfilled person than if he had just recognized what she was trying to communicate to him and had helped her out there or had acceded to some of her wishes or trying to make it work with her to be able to do something like that, right? So anyway, I don't know. Those are my thoughts. We are at 6:42. We've been doing this, a little over an hour. I know that I did 2 videos. Sorry to yell. I did 2 videos earlier about the censorship stuff. And, I don't think I have too much more to say. But if you're curious about my views on sort of that issue, I did get into it in my earlier 2 videos on that. What else? Dan Campbell says, whatever the benefits of industrialization, losing the choice of being close to your kids during the early years is not a gift and it's not humane. Depends on the situation, but the option is important. He's probably going to continue that thought there. Yeah, I mean, industrialization, it caused a lot of unfortunate changes because it used to be, as I think Dan understands, that before industrialization, there wasn't this stark choice between home and work or home and career. And maybe one of the benefits of the modern digital age is that increasingly now the home and career will come back together. I mean, we saw it with COVID, and I know a lot of people think that the work from home model turned out to be really flawed and they're going back to the office model. And I get that, but I do think that what we're going to see increasingly in the modern age is that the home will once again, in a lot of ways, become a place where one can work as it already is now. But, and the other thing about work is that people will dismiss the need to get outside the home on a daily basis. But I have to tell you, I mean, I'm a waitress. I said this on Ethan's show earlier today. I'm a waitress, and I don't consider being a waitress at a restaurant a deeply fulfilling, career-oriented job, right? This is one of the jobs that people would say, well, you know, women don't want to be doing that when they could just be at home. But I have to say, y'all, that having been said, there are so many times when I go to work, even when I don't want to go to work, even when I don't want to be there, there are so many times when I go and I think to myself, you know, I needed to get out of the house. It's actually good for me to have to do some tasks and to talk to other people and to talk to my friends and to interact and have some responsibility and to actually, you know, have to get some exercise too and all of that. Like, you all know what I'm talking about. There are ways in which, as the Nazis famously said, work makes men free. And of course, they took that adage way too far. But I don't think that it's accurate to say that a stay-at-home wife who rarely gets outside the domestic sphere, that is the ultimate healthiest way of being either. I think the ideal would be some kind of a balance where the mother is there, you know, especially in the kids' formative years, and is helping to create a home, but also where she also has other outlets as well. And I know a lot of people negotiate this in their families, and I have a lot of friends who negotiate this and so forth. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom, but I am just saying, like, even the kind of work that we think of as like shitty work or non-career oriented work, like I'm doing when I go waitress, even that in a way nourishes the soul and the body and the spirit. Now, I don't know about people doing, you know, high frequency trading or whatever at JP Morgan and interns who are having to work basically 20 hours a day and stuff. I'm not saying that all work is healthy or that modern work isn't toxic in a lot of ways, but I am saying that, again, it's a complicated question. And we can look at, again, someone like Erika Kirk in her bio to see that someone who's extremely traditional and would go on her podcast and would preach wifely submission, you know, in a nice and nuanced way, but would preach wifely submission and would say, ladies, if you must work, wait until your kids are grown and stuff. But then you look at her bio, I think that paradox, that contradiction makes her a very modern woman. So I would agree that she's a very modern woman in that sense, even as she's traditional in other ways. Candace Owens. Should we talk about Candace? Oh, man. You know what? This is funny. I went to visit my mom months ago, and I showed my mom the Brigitte Macron documentary. Here, I'm going to take full screen for a second. My mom and I watched the entirety of Candace Owens' Brigitte Macron series. So I was happened to be visiting my mom during that period. And I said, I don't know what to think about this. Let's watch it together, because my mom is a good sounding board. She is someone who has very different opinions from me and has lived a very different life from me in a lot of ways, and is not only wise, but is willing to stand up to me and tell me when she thinks that I'm seeing something wrong or that it's bullshit, you know, I'm spouting bullshit or whatever, right? And so I thought, I'm going to have my mom watch this with me, this Candace Owens, Brigitte Macron thing. I'm going to have my mom watch it with me, because she'll be able to tell me if I'm way off base on this. And so we watched the whole thing, and both of us came to the same conclusion, which was that Candace Owens is a master at smoke and mirrors. And I say this with admiration to a degree. Candace Owens, and if you see this Candace, I mean, I tell you to your face. I am telling you to your face. She is a master at smoke and mirrors. She's a master at taking various events and various pieces of information that don't actually prove anything, but putting it together in such a way, or slipping it past you in such a way, so that you feel like she actually has made a point or actually has provided legitimate evidence of something. And that was my problem with the Macron thing, is that when you actually looked at each individual point that she was making, or each individual piece of supposed proof, it fell apart. And I've given one example. I could give others, but the one example that I keep giving is that apparently, she said, Emmanuel Macron's his favorite work of literature, his favorite book, is a book by André Gide. And André Gide like Oscar Wilde, they were friends, was a pederast. And Oscar Wilde even wrote, meaning sexually attracted to, preferring teenage boys. And Oscar Wilde even wrote about a time when they had gone to basically a brothel together and had sex with two teenage Muslim boys who were offering themselves up, basically sex workers, right? So anyway, Candace's thesis then was that because this author, this French pedo, basically, this was Macron's favorite author, that therefore this was indicative of the fact that the Macrons are sexual deviants, and that you can see, and that basically they believe in and practice the same kind of sexual deviancy and support it. The problem with that thesis is that André Gide is also one of the most famous and most proclaimed and most celebrated writers in French history, in French literary history. He won a Nobel Prize, in fact, for one of his books. And I read some of his stuff in college and so forth, very much like Oscar Wilde in that way. So you have to understand that attacking someone for liking André Gide's literature is similar to assuming that because someone likes Oscar Wilde's work, that they must be a sexual deviant. And that's simply not the case. So I saw how Candace Owens was doing stuff like this through the entire podcast, where she was throwing information at people and she was slanting it or decontextualizing it in just such a way so that it sounded in some way like it could be possibly indicative of something. But then in fact, when you really analyze it or think about it, or you know what you're talking about, you know what she's talking about, you realize it's a nothing burger. So my point is to say that I do think when it comes to Candace Owens and people like her and these conspiracy theories, that there is very much a cry wolf effect of diminishing credibility, when after you've thrown one conspiracy, one far-fetched conspiracy after another at people, then they have to start eventually asking, do you simply see the world through this weird, distorted conspiracy filter? I know that she had a dust up with Jessica Krause, House and Habit, and House and Habit wrote some stuff in an online newsletter that Candace Owens took issue with, and I covered that little fight between them and everything. And I'm not saying that Candace was not, to some degree, justified in feeling irritated by some of the things that Jessica might have said, but then she went too far and suggested that Jessica might be some kind of an Israeli plant or Israeli spy sent to or basically weaponized to bring down or control or blackmail RFK Jr. And it's stuff like that just with Candace that just makes me go like, what? Because it's like she'll take things like way off into crazy world. So look, I don't know. Kash Patel, he's definitely flubbed this whole Charlie Kirk thing, just like he's flubbed other stuff, just like he flubbed the Epstein thing. Kash Patel in that way has been a big disappointment. And I certainly understand that there are aspects of it, the Kirk thing, that seem weird and that don't add up for people and whatever. But I do believe when it comes down to it, it was a crazy lone gunman who was Tyler Robinson, who was having some kind of a psychosexual meltdown and was projecting all of his own disgust toward himself and his lifestyle and his sexuality. He was projecting it onto Charlie Kirk. This is often how it is with these types of guys. He's projecting it onto him, exteriorizing it so that then he could kill him and he could try to kill his own self-disgust and self-doubt and self-hatred. I think that's what happened. And I don't believe the conspiracy theories. But this is going to be increasingly a pathological symptom of our modern age, that every time something happens, people are going to increasingly default to conspiracy theories. And that's why, someone like Kash Patel, for instance, needs to be more on his game, because he's already got people just waiting out there, just waiting to find flaws with what he's saying. And same thing with Erika Kirk and Turning Point. I don't think it's right that she's getting all this conspiracy shit thrown at her. But at the same time, Turning Point and Erika should have understood that her rollout was going to be problematic for a lot of people. And right or wrong, people don't expect to see a widow, a week after her husband's death, being so confident and seeming to enjoy speaking in front of the camera so much and so performative. So I don't know. But for me personally, it's the hypocrisy, and it's the discordance between her life and what she seemed to promote. But I understand other people can say, oh, well, you're misreading her or what have you. So we will see. But I've got to go. I hope that you've enjoyed this podcast and or this video. And you should check out my work if you've enjoyed this talk. My PayPal is below. Tips appreciated. Don't even need an account to do it, just a card. But if nothing else, like and subscribe and check out my other work. I've done not only political videos, but stuff on Me Too, Blake Lively, Johnny Depp, all of that, all those Me Too scams. All right. I guess that's it. I will see y'all later. Bye-bye.